The sound hit before the smoke did. No warning, no slow build, just the raw, grinding crunch of sheet metal at nearly 200 miles per hour, followed by the kind of silence that only comes after something genuinely catastrophic. Turn 3 at Talladega Superspeedway became a graveyard of twisted cars, leaking fluids, and broken championship hopes in a matter of seconds. The red flag dropped. Bubba Wallace's day ended before it had any chance to finish. And what followed, on team radio, in front of cameras, across social media, and inside NASCAR's own offices, turned a racing incident into one of the biggest controversies the sport has seen in years, raising a question that nobody in the garage wanted to answer directly: is Bubba Wallace's future in NASCAR actually at risk? To understand why lap 115 turned into a demolition derby, you have to understand what the race looked like before it got there, because the chaos did not come out of nowhere. Talladega opened with an unusual amount of patience. NASCAR's decision to stretch Stage 1 to 98 laps fundamentally changed the strategic feel of the early going, and drivers knew it. Nobody wanted to burn their race down in the first 100 laps when the field was this deep and the margins this thin. Fuel management was the dominant conversation. Position management was the game. The racing was tight but controlled, and Brian Preece took Stage 1 with Ford sitting strong at the top of the running order. Bubba Wallace was in the mix during those early stages, competitive, measured, not doing anything that raised flags. The race had the kind of careful energy that superspeedway veterans actually prefer, because when everyone is managing something, the speeds stay survivable even when the gaps between bumpers are measured in inches. But that dynamic has a shelf life at Talladega, and experienced drivers know it. The moment Stage 2 started, the saving stopped and the pushing started. The lanes got tight and the speeds pushed back toward 200 miles per hour, and that exact combination is what multiple drivers had been quietly flagging for months with the current superspeedway package. The race goes from carefully managed to dangerously committed in almost no time at all, and when 40 cars are stacked inches apart at those speeds, one bad push does not just end one car's day. It ends everyone's day. By lap 115, the race had been cooking long enough. It was ready to boil over. This is where the facts matter and where they need to be delivered precisely, because two completely different narratives emerged from the same 15 seconds of footage, and both of them cannot be entirely right. The official sequence of events began with Bubba Wallace leading the field. Ross Chastain delivered a hard shove at the end of the backstretch. The number 23 car turned sideways toward the outside wall. Cole Custer got caught with nowhere to go. And then the three-wide pack that had been racing through turn 3 collapsed into itself like a domino chain with no off switch, smoke, glass, and metal traveling at full speed with no room to correct. There was a shove from behind. There was pressure applied at a moment when the car's stability was already being tested. That is a concrete fact visible on the footage, and it matters significantly for any serious conversation about blame. But that same replay also showed something else to a different segment of fans: a driver who they believed moved too aggressively, blocked too late, and placed himself and the field in an impossible position. One replay, two completely different verdicts, and that split is precisely why this story exploded the way it did and why it has refused to die down even days after the checkered flag fell. The list of drivers who got collected was staggering. Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs, William Byron, and a long list of others whose race days ended in smoke and twisted sheet metal before they ever had a chance to make a real move for the front. The final tally, 26 of 40 cars involved, making it one of the largest wrecks in Cup Series racing in recent memory. The race did eventually produce a winner, Carson Hocevar surviving the chaos and beating Chris Buescher by 0.114 seconds in a 3-lap shootout for his first Cup Series victory, but the emotional story of the day was never the finish line. It was always that wreck. And more specifically, it was always the question of who owned it. X lit up within minutes of the crash, and what followed was not a unified verdict from the NASCAR fanbase, it was a split screen in real time. On one side, fans went hard after Bubba Wallace. The language was direct and, in some corners, hostile. They called the move reckless. They argued he caused the crash on his own. They questioned why he was not taking more direct and immediate responsibility for 26 cars ending up in the wall. The frustration was real and it was loud, and it fit into a pre-existing narrative that a portion of the NASCAR fanbase had already built around Wallace over several seasons of high-profile moments. But a meaningful chunk of fans pushed back against that narrative with equal force. Some pointed directly at Ross Chastain and the shove that started the sequence. Others asked why the package itself, the current superspeedway configuration that drivers had been flagging for months, never seemed to receive the same level of blame that individual drivers absorbed. Some fans who were newer to the sport openly questioned in the comments why Wallace was being blamed at all when the replay so clearly showed a hit from behind. And at Talladega specifically, that phenomenon makes sense, because these wrecks are almost always ambiguous enough to let whatever existing opinion a fan already holds about a driver determine how the footage gets interpreted after the fact. This is where the controversy shifted from the racetrack to the media, and where the public anger reached a genuinely different level. Bubba Wallace's reaction was not one consistent message delivered across all platforms, and that inconsistency became its own story. The quote that circulated was, "They wrecked us," a completely human reaction in the heat of the moment, said immediately after nearly 200 miles per hour of chaos, but one that became significant because of what followed on camera. In the TV interview, the tone shifted noticeably. Wallace took some responsibility for how the car was being handled in traffic, acknowledged the DNF, and framed the conversation around what the team needed to learn about managing the car when being pushed aggressively at superspeedway speeds. It was measured. It was not a direct finger pointed at Chastain. He absorbed a meaningful portion of the heat publicly rather than deflecting it entirely. The same tone carried through in the longer post-race version, acknowledging instability under aggressive pushing, calling the outcome frustrating, and committing to go back and move forward ahead of Texas. But here's the problem. The "figure out how to be pushed better" framing felt too technical and too soft to fans who had just watched half the field get demolished. Some interpreted it as spreading blame toward the car and the package rather than simply owning the moment cleanly and completely. And when the team radio tone sounded so different from the camera-ready tone, that gap fueled a narrative that Wallace's message was shifting depending on who was listening. This is not a condemnation, it is an explanation of why the public reaction landed where it did and why it has sustained the intensity it has. The broadcast controversy became its own separate fire, and it deserves its own honest look. Some fans noticed that when Fox Sports pushed the Bubba Wallace interview clip to social media, it was missing the opening exchange. His first line to Jamie Little, a sarcastic comment about dozing off during a long delay while waiting for the interview to begin, and the initial back and forth before the formal questioning started were cut from the posted version. What Fox shared with its audience started after that roughest edge of the moment had already passed. Fox was already under significant fire from fans who felt the broadcast had been drowning the race in commercial breaks at the worst possible moments. The frustration toward the network was already sitting at a high temperature before the clip ever got posted. When viewers spotted the edited version, it did not look like standard social media trimming, it looked like a network making a choice about what was comfortable to amplify and what was not. Fox deserved the heat it received for how that decision landed, and it added another layer to an already overcrowded controversy. The driver reactions reframed the entire conversation in a way that the social media debate never managed to, and they deserve serious attention. Ryan Blaney did not go after Bubba Wallace directly. He described the wreck as a pinball sequence, cars coming off each other in succession, and pointed to how unstable the current car becomes once aggressive pushing starts at superspeedway speeds. He was not assigning a single villain. He was describing a system designed to produce this outcome eventually. Joey Logano was more direct, and his quote carries real weight: "Do you want fuel saving or crashes? Because with the current package and round bumpers, those are your only two options." That is a driver with enough seniority and experience to recognize when a product is structurally broken, and he was saying plainly that the superspeedway product as it currently exists is exactly that. Kyle Larson added the same argument from a slightly softer angle, noting how abruptly the race shifted from conservation mode to full-speed chaos and saying he had no clear sense of where the middle ground was supposed to exist within the current rules. That does not erase individual decisions made on the track at lap 115. But it makes the story significantly larger than one driver and one moment, and it raises a legitimate question about whether NASCAR can keep running this superspeedway package without continuing to produce wrecks of this scale and consequence. Bubba Wallace was at the center of the big one. He was the visible trigger point. The fan anger was real, some of it was fair, and his public response could have been more direct and more consistent. Fox Sports made an avoidable mistake with the clip. Ross Chastain's shove started the chain. The field was already packed in an unstable configuration. Multiple drivers and basic physics did the rest. And the current superspeedway package keeps placing drivers in situations where one bad push turns into the biggest wreck of the season with almost no warning and almost no accountability at the structural level. The internet wanted a villain. The garage saw a broken system. After Talladega, both of those conversations deserve to be louder than they have been. Do you think Bubba Wallace caused the big one, or was this bigger than any one driver? Drop your answer in the comments. That conversation is worth having. And if this breakdown gave you something real to think about, hit the like button, share it with a NASCAR fan who needs the full picture, and subscribe to the channel for weekly race analysis, driver reactions, and every major controversy from around the sport. Every like and every subscriber keeps this coverage coming every single week.